The Pætheon presents What Came Out, The Origins of the Fastbrækers, written and read by the author Andrew Stewart Bergerson. Based on real events. Bastian and the Crusader Outpost. By the time Bastian reached the outpost at Douai, it was just before dawn on Stars Day. Sanchx had spent the night in jail, and Pætheon was already dead. But this is the tale of Bastian and the Crusader Outpost. It began with the hoot of an owl. Hoo! The young elder and a squad of 20 of Hawk Rider's best flyers perched high in the branches of a Lawson cypress. On another branch stood a great gray owl. He reacted, not in a spirit of vigilance, the way some top predators might, but of observation. "Who?" he asked. "None of your never mind," Bastian replied. A thrush chirped as well. It looked like the one from Hoosel Hill. "You neither." The Lawson is a tall cedar tree uncommon in Central Ward. Bastian guessed it had been planted as part of a grove, perhaps by feyfolk. To us, the vast wood looked like a wilder land, but much of it had been carefully nurtured. The cypress now had the misfortune of standing next to the northernmost outpost of the Northern Initiative. Loosely translated, Douai means something like dog's tail, since it was named for a famous Akita by the name of Tail, who saved his master from being eaten by a giant cobra. Only the Crusaders from the broken lands of Nod made the pun. "Do you know Douai to Douai?" Peering out from behind the trunk, Bastian could see the full scope of the tragedy. Hundreds of these ancient hardwoods had been massacred, their corpses lying flat in orderly pyramids on the edges of the clearing. The limbs of these once majestic trees had been cut to make firewood, their torsos the outpost itself. Damn these dorks! Similar piles of paving stones filled the clearing outside the fort, lined up like headstones, waiting for graves to be dug. They were intended for the Great Trunk Road. It ran through Tail from the town of Decision far to the south, penetrating the vast wood like a rondel dagger. The stones reminded Bastian of the bodies of his fairy friends. He saw the bruises on their delicate bodies, their wild fairy parts sticking out or broken. "Goddess, I hate dorks." "So you've said." Hawk Rider landed on Bastian's shoulder. His rectangular berry face now made him look like one of those square-jawed heroes of legend. "The Crusade is our enemy, not the Crusaders." "Still gonna make 'em pay." "I don't like them much either, but hatred can cloud a soldier's judgment." "I can see just fine." "You know that I'm captain of the fairy force." "It's my plan." Hawk Rider lost patience with the young elder. "You want center stage? Prove you've got what it takes. Assess the tactical situation, recruit. Fortifications?" Bastian studied the outpost. A low trench surrounds a wooden palisade, except for where the stone road enters and exits the outpost. The narrow trunks of wild conifers had been rammed into the forest floor in the shape of a square fort. They stood like 2 rows of sentinels, carved into spear-like spikes. Between them, thick hardwoods, split in half, were laid horizontally, one on top of the other. "There are some weak points along the wall." Bastian pointed to places where the Crusaders had not yet fully chinked the wood. "But it's strong enough to keep out the living forest." "Guards?" 6 dorks on each side." The Crusader squads were strolling along the allure, or wall walk, that ran inside the palisade. The platform was made of flat timbers, with bark still on their edges. "Weapons?" "Swords and crossbows. They'll get off several volleys before we reach the wall." "They'll raise the alarm." Hawk Rider pointed to an iron gong on each side. "Dozens more could come out from those barracks." Bastian spied over the walls. A main building of 2 stories stood free in the middle of the fort, boasting a single flag, the burnt tower of the Holy Inquest. Several single-story buildings lined the perimeter along the outer wall that Bastian figured were barracks for the soldiers and sheds for the animals and supplies. "There's a full company of Crusaders in there, plus a pack of guard dogs." Another building to one side looked like a latrine, with different entrances for different castes and ranks. Neatly tucked under the walkway, around the palisade, the firewood was stacked evenly. Carts were parked side by side. Even the unpaved ground was flat and well packed. Bastian didn't even see a wheelbarrow out of place. So neat and tidy, tied tight as a knot, tight as old Gwynig's sphincter. He was thinking of the headmaster of his former boarding school. "So explain to me now," Hawkrider asked, "how you plan on defeating a stronger, fortified enemy." The fairy force buzzed their agreement. "Attack from above," Bastian proposed. "Make those walls into a cage for them instead of a barrier for us." "That plan breaks a basic rule of combat. Engage in battle only if you're superior in strength, when you're sure to win." Bastian waved it off like a fairy tale. "That's just math." "A frontal assault is foolish." "But what do you really think, Hawk?" Elder can see things extremely far away, even beyond the horizon. Not that Bastian ever cared to look very far ahead. But he caught a glimpse of something stuck in a Crusader's breast pocket. "What about those wands?" "The purple ones bind," Hawkrider reminded him. "The red ones punish." "And the blue ones heal the sick," Bastian added. "Kind of like Tengri." "What's a Tengri?" "Warlocks seal pacts with the gods through holy symbols." "And how exactly do you know this?" "We had a warlock in my circus troupe. He read futures and cast curses. People pay good money for that." "Do these Crusaders have to swear some kind of oath?" "Not these ones. They're like knocked crossbows. Just pull the trigger." "You've used one." "For a lark. You should have seen the look on the face of that fat man when he couldn't sing." Then Bastian interrupted himself. "Hold the show! Is the captain of the fairy force formulating a plan?" "Collecting intelligence. Can you get your hands on some of those wands?" "You tricky little pixie!" "It would take several fairy flying together to fire one off," Hawkrider calculated. "But I would love to see those Crusaders get a taste of their own punishments." "You know," Bastian recalled, "the warlock in our troop got drunk one day and sat on his own wand. Caused quite the explosion." Bastian began to see the whole story and how he would tell it. "Imagine if those Crusader wands all broke at once. That would be quite the show. The red tails could serve as bait." "No way." "We'll call it Bastian and the Double Diversion." "No, Bastian." "Just hear me out." Bastian got that devious look in his eyes. "What if the red tails tip some jars, spill some milk, break a window, you know, the classics, but let the dorks catch 'em in the act?" Hawkrider wanted to disagree, but so far it sounded very fairy. "Then the Spitfires attack, zoom, from the other side of the outpost, as if the red tails were the diversion and the Spitfires were the real thing. A frontal assault, a second diversion. As soon as the dorks fight back, they all skedaddle, but leaving a trail of fairy dust." Hawkrider amended the plan. "As long as the trail leads away from the hawthorn." He was invested now. "In the meantime, I'll find something flammable. And then, light it up." Hawkrider was impressed. "Well done, Elder. Very fairy of you. Our pilots could lead them towards the fens." Bastian thought of the ogre. "Jeer's always hungry." Hawkrider agreed, and not picky about who he eats. "Bayberry! Damselwing!" The two lieutenants flashed over to their captain's side. Bayberry had root-like feet, so she perched on a branch like a bird. Damselwing had a tail like a dragonfly. It enabled him to fly with extreme accuracy in a dogfight, and stood up at attention when he hovered. Bayberry, take charge of the Red Tails. Damselwing, you've got the Spitfires as usual. We're going to play a trick on those Crusaders. Finally, Bayberry replied. Look, Damselwing pointed. It's the dorks who attacked the Hawthorn. In the dark before dawn, Quentin and Jaway were making their way furtively through the yard towards the main building. Time for some payback. No, Bastian, Hawkrider commanded. We are here on a mission. It's not personal. Jugglers can do several things at once, you know. I'd like to see you do one thing right first. Don't worry your berry head so much, Hawk. I'll fix everything. Bastian was thinking of those wands. Sighing, Hawkrider turned to the pilots who hovered behind him, ready for action. You heard the circus clown. Bayberry, you begin the operation when that cloud moves past the moon. Take the Red Tails to the kennels, poke some of the larger hounds in the rear, and set them to howling. Damselwing, the moment you hear barking, attack the other side of the outpost. Make mischief. Then spill lots of dust on your way straight towards the fens. Don't stop till you run into something nasty. And hungry, Bastian added. Above all, Hawkrider said, keep those dorks away from the Hawthorn. The Red Tails nodded their understanding. Fly far, fly fast, fly clever. The pilots repeated the motto of the fairy force. Fly far, fly fast, fly clever. A subtle change came over the pilots. They were seasoned warriors, so they were not scared of battle. Chanting their motto made them just a little bit smarter and braver. All thanks to the bond that wedded them together as a team, the G of their warlord. It was kind of like the feeling that Bastian used to get at the circus. His leading roles were made that much more magical by the supporting actors. It was a feeling Bastian was happy to have again. So he whispered the words of the motto to himself, as if he were not just a recruit, but a full member of the force. Fly clever. But he was too late. The Red Tails had already darted off to get into position. What you gonna do, Hawk? What I always do. Keep an eye on the enemy. What about you? What I always do. Give 'em a show they won't forget. Bastian made his way to the backside of Dog's Tail and hid in the shadows under the palisade wall. The cloud passed. He heard a yelp followed by a lot of barking. Gongs rang. Officers shouted. The Red Tails fled into the forest to the northwest, led by Bayberry. A first wave of dorks gave chase, led by a team of barking Akitas, but they had no chance of catching up with the fairy force. Bastian wrung his hands, mocking the sinister tone of the villain of a melodrama. Yea, all according to my evil plan. Circus acts are often a bricolage of themes and characters from popular culture. Bastian went over the top. He assaulted his friends with a constant barrage of cultural references. The thrush appeared on the outpost wall. Hey, stop bombing my act. He shushed it away. Find your own outpost to destroy. It flew away only once he slipped over the wall. And stay gone this time. Behind the main building was a basement window, but the cellar was occupied. He spotted Sergeant Zhang down there, arguing with his soldiers. So the young acrobat scooted up the wall to the roof and found a window in the attic. He waited until he could hear a second wave of Crusaders charging into the wood after Damselwing and the Spitfires. An eerie stillness settled over the outpost. Then Bastian slipped into the attic without making a sound. The top floor was an office empty of people, but there was a desk and a chest. They were locked, but made out of wood and leather respectively. Only the locking mechanism was iron. Let's see what you've got inside. Wands, maybe?" Bastian took out a narrow-tipped throwing dagger that he liked to use for delicate operations and concentrated on his spleen. It was the source of his Qi. He caused his sword to light on fire. Normally he would evoke a yellow flame, so it released more light than heat, but he reversed it now. The blue flame made the dagger glow red hot, like a brand. He cut a flap into the chest lid, which made the room smell of burnt leather, and opened it carefully with the tip of his dagger, so as not to avoid igniting the contents. The case was full of wands. "Told you, Hockey." Some had purple tips, some had red, but there were lots of blue at the bottom. "Don't mind if I do." Bastian let his dagger cool on the desk, took as many wands as he could, and stashed them in his belt. Then he threw a bunch into the smoldering coals in the hearth. "That'll make a big bang." He estimated how long it would take before his little surprise went off and started a slow count from 15. Bastian considered it lucky to dedicate 1 round to each of the 14 gods, plus an extra round for me. There was a book on the table that caught his eye. It was a diary of some kind, written in the language of the Vandra. He opened it to the last pages. A captain named Baotsai recorded the progress she was making with the building of the Great Trunk Road. She described cleansing the forest of its vermin and bringing order to the wilder land. Blah, blah. Bastian flipped pages. Sergeant Zhang provided a full report. Their disfigured forms combine body parts from multiple species. Revolting. "Don't be mad that fairy looked better than you." Bastian started arguing with the diary. "They come and go at will, between the spirit and mortal worlds." "Oh, the horror." "Bring crime and chaos." You misspelled fun and games. "Their encampment is a threat to the security of the Pætheon." "Damn straight it is." "I approved another action for tomorrow. Plugging the last holes in the dike." "Not if your dike's on fire." Bastian looked at the wands in the hearth. They were heating up slowly. 14. There was no rush. Then someone screamed. "That's no fairy." Another cry. "And it screams like a girl." Bastian took back his dagger, drew his 2 scimitars from the sheaths on his back, and crept down the stairs. On the ground floor he found an empty room with weapons, but no chest of wands. Footsteps came. Bastian lurked in the shadows. A voice called from right outside the front door. "Butnath! Fukuju! Are you still here?" A single Crusader ran into the room. "I forgot my—" Bastian walloped the Crusader in the head with the hilt of his sword. 13. The young man slumped to the floor without ever seeing his attacker. Only afterwards did Bastian recognize him as the Tieren recruit. The sounds of a struggle came up another set of stairs from the basement below. Bastian knew that he had to get out before the wands exploded. "Now there's a damsel in distress." The underground room was lit by torches stuck in bracers on the dirt floor. It was not a prison so much as a dirty set of holding cells. Items were laid out on a table for inspection. 2 Crusader knives, a sword belt, and a small crystal egg. The floor was uneven. There were dark places, particularly in and around the cells, where the soil was stained brown, but the color of the blood around the ferret in the cage was still red, fresh. The bolts were stuck in the corpse. Bastian checked for signs of G. The story's over for that guy. The fight in the other cell caught his attention. Even from behind, Bastian recognized the 2 Crusaders from the day before. The Sakura woman was watching, while the Marathi Diabolus knelt over the inmate's body. He was trying to pull the inmate out of the cramped cell. "I'll show you a real man." He dropped his pants. "Ugh! Bastian looked away. Can't unsee that. The prisoner was a little person of some kind, smaller than a dwarf and without the beard. She was pretty messed up. Her face was bloodied, and her hands were bound together tightly by the sticky thread that those Crusaders like to shoot out of their wands. But she was a fighter. She was struggling to break free of Butnath's grasp, using the bars of the cell for leverage. She was holding desperately onto one of the bars with every available finger to stop from being pulled out into the open. Get your... She loosened one leg. Damn hands! She kicked away Butnath's attempt to grab her. Off me! Dukar! Butnath cursed. 12, Bastian said to himself. Her footwork was impressive. Bastian got distracted for a moment by the hairy feet. Most people can't wait to get out of their cell. This girl wants to stay in. Her clothing, which used to be fine silks, looked like something that a boy might wear, but through the rips in her shirt, Bastian could tell. There are girl parts underneath the boy clothes. That's a horse of a different gender. Then Butnath pinned her legs open. He ripped through the fabric of her trousers with both hands, and something shifted in Bastian. A sense of fundamental wrongness that needed righting. A fire began to blaze in his spleen. It surprised him, as it may surprise you, since Bastian was no classic hero. He moved stealthily down the stairs, in a fey mood. 11. The hobbling fought for dear life. She slipped one leg free and kicked the Diabolus again and again. Sometimes she landed a solid hit to his face. The woman guard seemed reluctant to get involved directly, as if some voice in her head warned that she was stepping over the line, but she also could not look away. Help me grab her, Butnath demanded. Don't you want to get some payback for what she did to Sanam? No, no, the prisoner begged. The little thing began to tremble. Fukuju removed her sword, entered the cell, and held one leg. She looked at the victim with a mixture of rage and jealousy. A fire was ready to explode out of the elder. He braced to strike, but the prisoner spoke first. 10. Bastian stopped short. There's no way she could know. He was referring to the wands he had stuffed into the hearth. She was tied up down here, literally. Even weirder, they were almost in sync with their counting. What are the chances of that? A good performer knows how to adapt to fellow actors. Bastian considered whomping the officer on the head with the back of his blade, but he didn't want the Diabolus to sleep through his big entrance. Fukuju now held both legs in place, so Butnath could step back and finish removing his pants. It was the opening Bastian needed. He ignited his sword with his G. For maximum effect, he used more light than heat. Shining bright green, he leapt into the fray dramatically, landing right at the door of the cell between Butnath and his intended victim. Look who I caught with his pants down! The Crusaders moved away from him in shock. Even the prisoner shrunk back in fear. Fukuju pointed. The Fey monster! She dove outside the cell for her sword. For a second, Bastian thought again of his jongleur training. Safety first. But there was something so offensive to him about a woman helping a man rape a prisoner. You should really be ashamed of yourself. So he turned up the heat on his blade and stabbed her with it. This is the Bastian I knew. All fun and games until someone stoked his fire. Then deadly. The half-naked Diabolus grabbed for his wand with one hand, while trying to restring his pants with the other. Though it mixed his metaphors, it was entertaining for Bastian to see Butnath fumble with his wands. Fukuju lay on the ground, grasping at her side. Blood immediately began to seep through her uniform. Bastian had only ever seen the fake stuff they used on stage, so he watched, fascinated, as Fukuju pulled her hand away from her wound. The heat from his blade had boiled her blood and scalded her skin. The stench of burned flesh filled the room. Again the inmate counted. 9, like she was reassuring herself of something. The prisoner's fingers were shaking too much to untie her bindings. Bastian saw tiny remnants of magical cords littered all over the cells. He also noticed that 3 engorged horns protruded from the Diabolus that night, though one was smaller than the others. Bastian was always sensitive to dramatic irony. In his panic, the Diabolus knocked over the torches, filling the cellar again with dark. Bastian placed his sword right at the devil's very mortal anatomy. The Diabolus shrunk back from the flame and went limp, in more ways than one. "No," he begged. "Please." "So you're an ordinary sort of devil after all." "Don't hurt him!" Fukuju moved towards Bastian. The heat from his blade must have partially cauterized her wound, leaving her more able to fight than he realized. "What did I just say?" With a snap of his right forearm, Bastian connected the hilt of his blade with Fukuju's face. "Oops." Then Bastian cut upwards just a little with the left. The Diabolus howled in agony. "There I go again. Bad Bastian." Falling back to the ground, Fukuju managed to take out her wand and cast it in a rage. "By the Red Queen, punish!" That did not go well for Bastian. Pain shot through his body like fire as he remembered each bruise, each wound that he had caused in the last 2 days, including the damage he had just inflicted on these Crusaders. The dizzy pain of concussion, the searing pain of a stab in his own side, the fire in his loins at his own castration. It was not real, but he felt it all the same. Bastian fell to the ground, his hand on his crotch, his head almost landing at the prisoner's feet. 8, the prisoner said. While everyone else lay sprawled on the ground, Fukuju tried to stand up and recover her sword. She almost fainted on the stairs from loss of blood. Slowly, she pulled herself up again using the wooden wall as a brace and tried to drag Bootmouth up as well. Bastian tossed and turned on the ground. Pain and guilt intermingled in a miasma of tortures. "Someday, your joking will get someone hurt." He saw the figure of Lord Micus, chastising. "But it wasn't supposed to be me," he cried out loud. 2 dirty, smelly, furry feet were suddenly slapping the sides of his head. "Hey! Smack! Stupid! Smack! Smack! Snap out of it!" The jongleur tried to swat the feet away from his head. "Your feet smell like piss." "Not like I just had a terrifying experience." She almost struck him again with a foot, but he dodged the blow. I didn't mean it like that." "Can we discuss it later? The dorks are getting away." Bastian rolled over to try to push himself up. For a breath, he lay with his face between the inmate's feet. "And stop your gawking." Smack! Hard across the face. "Ow! I was looking at your bruises, not—" "Never mind." But she had slapped the curse away. Nothing like a blow to the temples to get your attention. 7. The prisoner was talking to herself, but Bastian was still astonished by the coincidence. Time to finish the show. In one smooth motion, Bastian turned over, jumped to his feet, drew both swords, and heated them to glowing. The Crusaders were on the stairs. Both had recovered their weapons, but they could hardly walk. Fukuju held her side and Bootmouth his groin. Blood was everywhere. Bastian walked grandly to center stage. "Now, I don't know King Zhongyi personal-like, but his name means justice, so I imagine His Majesty don't look kindly on dorks who break the law." His pale skin, too, glowed brightly now, filling the cellar with the dark emerald of the forest at night. Bastian slashed his 2 blades against each other. Sparks flew into flames. It was his trademark move. Behind him, Bastian could tell that the prisoner had stopped fiddling with her bindings. She was watching his every move. There was something legendary about him, standing there, swords drawn, defending the vulnerable, filling this dark cellar with light. And Bastian knew it. What's the punishment, Officer Bootnath, for battery and attempted rape? For the mass murder of innocent fairy? Stay back! The diabolist struggled to defend himself, his horns deflated. I'm making my favorite meal tonight. Charred goat. Bastian feigned a strike with the right. Bootnath blocked it. But Bastian stabbed for real with the left, clean through his leg. Bootnath cried out in pain. That was for Do-Dancer. Bootnath! Fukuju tried to grab onto Bastian's arm. He elbowed her in the jaw, and she fell back on the floor in a faint. Stay down this time. 6, the prisoner said impatiently. End him. Bastian had never before played a killer, but he was working his way up to it. He struck again. Bootnath blocked the left, so Bastian stabbed for real with the right. It penetrated his stomach. That was for coxcomb. Kill him already, the inmate demanded from her cell. Bastian danced with the left, this time before the diabolist could recover. And this, the hot blade made a squishing, hissing sound straight through his heart, is for spear thistle. Bastian made sure Bootnath saw the fire in his eyes before the Crusader crashed into the table, dead. 5. Bastian sheathed his swords, took out the blue wand, grabbed Fukuju by her uniform, and slapped her awake. You're taking your time to die. He pulled her close, so the wand was between their noses. But I can fix that. You're going to tell me how this blue one works, and maybe, just maybe, your cursed soul won't spend eternity with your buddy. Just point and say heal, she begged. Please. That's what I thought. And he threw her head against the wall with a thump, knocking her out. Damn dork. The elder turned down the heat, letting his swords cool for a moment on the floor, and reducing the glow to make himself look less fey, more ordinary. The dark returned, but the look of panic stayed in the prisoner's eyes. She was now desperately trying to bite her way through her bindings. 4, Bastian reminded himself. Better get a move on. Bastian entered the cell. She jolted backward at his touch. He retreated immediately, holding up his hands to show that he meant no harm. I'm here to help, mini-person. The smell of urine reminded Bastian how scared she had been, and probably still was. We gotta get out of here, and don't have time to waste. Bastian moved carefully to the outside of her cell, so there was a set of iron bars between them. Then he cut her free with his dagger. The hobbling ripped the remnants of the cut cords away like they were venomous snakes. Then, rubbing her sore wrists, she pointed to Fukuju. Is that one dead too? Soon. The prisoner's face was covered in shame. She began to put what was left of her clothing back on. Bastian hated the Crusaders for doing this to her, but was also angry at himself for being so insensitive. He looked away discreetly. The moment Bastian's back was turned, however, the hobbling was all business. The veil of the victim disappeared, and the con artist artfully recovered what she had purposefully let roll onto the floor of the cell. A small wooden object, the shape of an 8-sided die. She slipped it back into the hidden hem of her tattered pants. 3, Bastian remembered, a little late. You can turn around now. The hobbling spoke awkwardly again, as if overwhelmed by shame at who she was and what had almost happened to her. In the 9th Age, such fluidity of gender is more accepted. It was both a crime and a sin in the 8th, punishable by death. Sancho risked his life every time he dressed as Sancho, even more so as Pridbor. It was hardly the strangest thing Bastian had seen in his life. He used to work at a circus after all. I shall call him a him, Bastian decided, since he's dressed like one, for the moment. As I have already observed about Bastian, he was the generous sort. Speaking for myself, I was raised to believe that gender was something stable, natural, ordained by the fates for the benefit of mortal creatures. I got quite confused when I first met Sanchx. What clothes could be so important to risk your life? At the time, he too insisted on being treated only as Sancho. Never as Sancha, not even Sanchx. All that came later. Disrespect intended, Bastian snarked. You look like trash, man. The inmate tried to straighten himself out, but his clothes were in tatters. He was half naked, in fact. His skin was smeared with blood and dirt. Both were caked in his hair. It looked like someone had taken a shovel to his ribs, and he smelled like a cesspool. But Sancho shrugged. I've had worse. It did not escape his notice that Bastian had said, man. Bastian laughed. I like you. As a friend, not to disappoint. Sancho smiled shyly. That's fine. Well, maybe this'll help. Bastian moved back to the front of the cell, pointed the blue wand at the newly liberated prisoner, and commanded, Heal. Bastian blessed them so many times with the redemption of Yvain that it cracked the wand. The whole room glowed a sky-blue light that felt like rich hot soup in the season of caves. Even Bastian felt refreshed. Bastian appreciated the dramatic effect of the threads reweaving themselves, but Sancho held his breath. He looked like a new hobbling. His skin was clean. The bruises and cuts were all gone. Fresh, cool air cleared out the smell of fear, as the light of Yvain dissolved into the early morning sun. Sancho took a deep breath, filling his lungs for the first time without pain. Bastian imagined that he felt like himself again. You look like a lost princeling. Bastian saw a cynical thought cross the hobbling's eyes, like the shadow of another person's face. But then he shrugged and held out his hand. Sancho Smallburrows. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mr. Smallburrows. That made Sancho smile honestly. For the first time. For a long time. The name's Bastian. People call me Flame Dancer. It's kind of my thing. What about you? I'm kind of a thief, Sancho admitted candidly. A thought interrupted. Chew, they said in unison. Then they laughed together. And now there's that, Bastian said. They both felt the urgency of the Count. We should be leaving, Sancho advised. Yep. I just need to get a few things. The thief slipped past the jongleur to the wreckage of the table. He took Sanam's old belt and slipped her 2 daggers into it. Then he slipped a crystal egg back into his pocket and sighed audibly. Bastian caught Sancho looking nervously at him, but the elder made it seem as if he was busy placing his swords back in their sheaths. Ready? Set, the hobbling nodded. Before either said go, they both began the race, up the stairs and out the door as fast as they could. Bastian pulled ahead in the open courtyard, but Sancho caught up on the wall, scampering up it quicker than a rabbit from a wolf. One! They shouted in unison as they sprang together from the parapet into the dark forest. The building exploded behind them, flames bursting out the windows. That would be the wands, Bastian explained when they reached a safe distance. So that's what it was. Bastian waited for Sancho to catch his breath. Back there, in the holding cell, what were you counting? On my luck. So how'd you know what was going to happen if you didn't know what was going to happen? Not what. When? Sancho replied with such confidence that Bastian accepted it as the truth, even though he had no idea what it meant. Nice trick, Bastian observed. Where'd you learn it? From a pirate. Bastian's curiosity was piqued, but he knew better than to ask for the tale right away. A second round of explosions followed as the other buildings caught fire. More wands? Sancho asked. The dorks had crates of 'em. Nice. Where'd you learn it? A circus. The fire spread to the walls of the outpost as they began running through the trees. I told Hawk I'd burn it down, Bastian boasted. That explosion's going to be visible for leagues, Sancho guessed. If only I could be so grossly incandescent. Bastian imagined himself taking a bough from a tree, like a forest bandit. Bastian was busy imagining how he would spin the tale of their fast break from the outpost, and the puns he would make with the name Dog's Tail, when his fantasy was interrupted by a whisper rustling through the trees. Come home, Bastian! It was the Queen. We're under... Melisandre's voice was cut off. Hawk Rider! The young elder called out, but the captain was nowhere to be found. Bastian could still see the sparkling trail of pixie dust that the fairy force had laid to the northeast, away from the Great Hawthorn. But a second set of Crusader tracks ran straight east, right towards the fairy glade. In the tree trunks, trail markers smoldered red and brown. Bastian thought of all those red-tails and spitfires heading towards the fens, leaving Queen Melisandre alone with just her royal guard. No, 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 not again! The panicked elder raced off into the vast woods. He forgot about his new friend. In a heartbeat, Bastian was impossibly far ahead. Sancho found himself lost again, in the middle of the vast wood, alone. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Look for the next episode, Sanchx and the Færi Globe, and the novel Detention, Book 1 of the Tales of the Fastbrækers. You can visit thepætheon.com for free maps, glossaries, and more. Or support this project at ko-fi.com/thepætheon for access to Discord, hard copies, role-playing adventures, and more. Music created by Gerbob for the Pætheon LLC. The Pætheon and the Tales of the Fastbrækers are registered trademarks of the Pætheon LLC. No part of this story or audio recording may be reproduced or transmitted on any medium for any reason without permission of the Pætheon LLC. Bastian and the Crusader Outpost, What Came Out, June 2025, copyright 2025, the Pætheon LLC, all rights reserved.